Hi, welcome to our verbal operant training. Today, we want you to be able to define verbal behavior, define the basic verbal operants, define listener responding, and be able to identify and classify various examples of verbal operants in imitation training. Traditional views of language focus on the structure of language, such as grammar and syntax. Some traditional explanations of language post innate and/or internal mechanisms. You might ask, how did verbal behavior come to be? Or what was the process behind how verbal behavior started? Well, back in 1934, Skinner was invited to a dinner at the Harvard Society for Fellows. Next to him was seated Alfred Whitehead. Now, Alfred Whitehead said that human behavior was very important and he thought that it had a lot of value. However, he said that our science of human behavior was not adequate in understanding verbal behavior and what people are saying. So he said to Skinner, I want you to explain this statement. There is no black scorpion falling upon this table. So what did Skinner do? He took that as a challenge. The next morning he woke up and started his interpretation of verbal behavior. 23 years later, he published Verbal Behavior in 1957. Now that you understand how verbal behavior came to be, you might ask, what is verbal behavior? Well, it requires two components. It requires a speaker and a listener, and verbal behavior is reinforced through the mediation of other people. In other words, it's a three-term contingency. Thus, when we examine the verbal operants, we need to do the same analysis. We're going to move from left to right. You have the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So here you see the juice. What is the meaning of the word, you might ask? How do we know when someone means when she says the word or he says the word juice? To determine the meaning of that word, we must first determine the variables responsible for its emission. Skinner's interpretation of language allows us to do just this. We're not able to tell the function by form alone. For example, when you hear someone say juice, how do you determine what he or she means? Well, just based on that information, you can't. So this leads us to talk about verbal operants and how we classify language. First is the mand. In layman's terms, a mand means asking or requesting for items, actions, attention, or even information. So in the slide you see our antecedent is an establishing operation plus the presence of the audience, and that evokes verbal behavior, and the verbal behavior can be a vocal verbal response, it could be a sign, or it could be handing a peck to someone. And then the consequence is that specific form of reinforcement. So if we look at a child who is cookie deprived in the presence of mom, the child says cookie, and the mom gives him a piece of cookie. According to Skinner, the mand is under the functional control of relevant conditions of deprivation or aversive stimulation. Unlike any of the other verbal operants, the mand is unique in that it specifies its own reinforcement. In this example, the child was deprived, which evoked the verbal response cookie, and the reinforcer was a specified cookie. This verbal operant is the only verbal operant that directly benefits the speaker. In another example of a child wanting to play chase, the antecedent would be no attention plus the sight of dad. The verbal behavior would be the child saying chase me or signing chase me, and the consequence would be the specific reinforcement in that dad chases the child. Typically developing children frequently mand for attention. Now I'm going to show you a video of what this looks like with a child.
Give me the book.
Sure, here's the book. Oh, it's Sam. He doesn't like green eggs and ham. Let me take it. Oh. Lion.
All right, Hoodie, look. Which one do you want? Play tablet. That's really good. Here you go. Whoa.
you'll edit this out.
That one? Oh, where'd it go? Play tablet? That was awesome, dude!
Aw, it's raining.
It's raining.